of the Maryland Black Chamber of Commerce, and we're glad that you're here today. We have a series of seminars and webinars focused on federal government contracting. So it's the Government Contracting Acceleration and Growth Seminars 2023. There's a series of 5 seminars, and today is the second one, April 5th, excuse me. Build your infrastructure for growth finances, and that's what we're going to be speaking about today. We have another session May 9th, Be Seen, Be Heard, Visibility and Marketing. Another session on May 23rd, Show Me the Money, Cash Flow and Capital Access. June 6th, Buy or Seller, Growth, growing your business either through acquisition or organically. And then the last session would be June 20th, which will be a in-person event titled Make New Best Friends, Relationships, and GovCon Success. So we want to be able to meet in person for that last one. So we want to thank you for joining us today. And Don, I throw it over to you.
Okay, welcome everyone to this second session. It's called Build Infrastructure for Growth, Finances, and Accounting. And I've got to tell you, in government contracting, the numbers are probably the most important thing that you can pay attention to. And so today we're going to be sharing with you some vital information about being able to manage the numbers in your government contract accounting, from the chart of accounts down to the systems, down to reporting. There's a lot to cover, and we can't cover everything. But again, we hope we'll be able to answer your questions during the Q&A in the half an hour after the session begins. John, you want to introduce Dion?
Yes, I will. We are excited, and we are really fortunate to have with us Mr. Dion Norris. It's the CEO of the Norris Accounting and Tax Services, CPA, LLC. He has over a decade of experience assisting the U.S. government, small businesses, Fortune 500 companies, and nonprofit organizations in accounting, audit, internal controls, process improvement, and tax-related matters. Dion holds degrees in accounting, a bachelor's and a master's. He has a master's in marketing and an MBA. So he's one of the most well-educated brothers you'll meet.
Appreciate it.
What this tells you is that he loves to learn. And as an entrepreneur and businessman, he loves to share his knowledge. So we want to thank you that we are the beneficiary of that today. In addition to these degrees, he has the CPA licenses in Maryland and Virginia, and is a certified project management professional, and is a member of the Maryland Black Chamber of Commerce. We are so excited to have Dion with us today. And just before we get started, a couple items for protocol. Don and I are going to ask Dion a series of questions back and forth that he's going to respond to for the next few minutes. If you have any questions in the interim, please use the chat function. 2 things will happen. We'll try to incorporate your questions in our conversation. And if not, once we are finished, we're definitely going to have an open mic, which is a Q&A session for any question that you have for Dion. So if we don't get to your question when you put it in the chat, please be patient with us. And when we come to the Q&A, feel free to ask your question. And then we would ask, when you ask your question, if you could introduce yourself, let us know who you are, your name, and your business. And if you don't have a business, you still just have a question, that's fine. We still want to hear from you. You can still tell us who you are. And so we always love meeting new people. So I'm going to get us kicked off here with the first question of the day.
But John, could I say 2 things?
Go right ahead.
One, I always say I'm the smartest accountant in the room. I can't say that anymore because Dion has 3 master's degrees. Okay? So I hate him already. Number 2, his PMP degree certification is so pertinent to government contracting. And that's why we're talking today. The accountant that does the books for your government contracting company has to be versed in government contracting. Has to be versed in government contracting. There's no substitute for it because it's a specialized area. The accounting is specialized, the reporting is specialized. So today is a very, very important session. And so please take your pens and pencils out, your iPads, pay attention to what Dion's got to say. Go ahead, John. Thank you.
And as the rap artist said, keep my mind on my money on my mind. So there you go. We will get started here. First question is, What does DCAA stand for? What does
Mhm.
DCAA do in relation to government contracting?
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Before I start, I just wanted to piggyback off of what Don said is government contracting is unique in that it is a blend of commercial accounting standards and standards that are specifically for the government. So it's a modified accrual type of accounting. And that's the aspect that we're going to look at today is it is very unique and the way you have to account for costs and account overall. So back to the question, DCAA stands for the Defense Contract Audit Agency. So what they are responsible for as an agency is auditing they have the ability to audit every single defense contractor at a moment's notice.
Mm.
There is no requesting I want to audit now, a year from now. They have the ability to, at any given moment, if you have a contract within the Department of Defense, to say that you are under an audit and request documentation and to ensure that you are in compliance with the accounting standards. So, excuse me, and they're responsible for ensuring that you as a government contractor are compliant to cost accounting standards, the financial acquisition regulation, which is the government-wide regulation when it comes to acquisition and cost accounting standards, and any specific Department of Defense standards. They are responsible to make sure that you are enforcing those standards within your own particular business, and they had to build it the ability to go in there and audit you at any moment's notice. Got a little tongue twisted there.
No problem.
Yeah.
So why is DCA compliance important, Dion? Why is it advisable for people to follow the DCAA mandates and when they're setting up their government contracting accounting system?
Yes. So first, the reason you need to stay compliant with DCAA is because there's a set of standards by which the government basically allocates contracts and how they want to be billed. So you can only bill them for in accordance with how they want to be billed. So that's why it's important to maintain an accounting system and appropriate processes to ensure that you are only billing them according to what the regulations say that you can bill them for. So we'll get further along in the conversation with those questions. But the reason that you want to stay compliant with a DCAA accounting system and overall system is, one, if you're not, you can fail an audit, which no one likes failing anything, whether you're a commercial company or a government contractor, no one likes to fail an audit. But more importantly than that, by failing a DCAA audit, you had a potential to not bid on any more potential defense contracts. So that is mainly the more sticking point, is that you can exclude yourself from any particular contract in the future that any Department of Defense agency or satellite agency may come out with because you failed an audit. And not only that, will you not be able to bid on contracts? Your company reputation is on the line that you are not following appropriate standards. So it's a lot more than just dotting your T's, crossing your I's. There is more that goes into it because of the potential ripple effects and down trace effects can be catastrophic to a government contractor.
Yeah, and DCAA can come in and audit any aspect of the accounting system. You don't know where they're coming, you don't know where they're going. And so everything has to be in good order. So thank you, Dion, for that explanation.
Yeah, Deanna, a quick follow-up question. What if I'm a contractor or thinking about being a contractor in the federal government at one of the non-DOD agencies, non-Department of Defense, one of the civilian agencies? Is the DCAA still relevant to me? Should I still have my accounting records developed to that standard?
Yes, DCAA is still relevant. They have authority to also audit agencies through agreements that are external to the Department of Defense. So just because you may not be particularly under a Department of Defense contract, the same regulations and standards still apply government-wide, because government-wide procurement with the federal government and cost accounting standards are government-wide, not just Department of Defense specific.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Can I, when I look at the various accounting software systems, accounting software such as QuickBooks, can that be tailored to become DCAA compliant?
Yes. Yeah, I just want to kind of back up on that question. So when we're discussing about a DCAA compliant system, there is officially no DCAA compliant system that DCAA authorizes or has a list of.
Okay.
There are certain criteria that a system must meet in order to be compliant, but there's no official system
Mhm.
that they authorize that is compliant. It's just you have to meet this set of criteria. QuickBooks is one of them. QuickBooks at its core is not compliant with everything that DCAA requires, but there's options and features that can be added to QuickBooks to ensure that you are in compliance with a DCAA accounting system. So I definitely want to make that distinction, because there is going to be no list
Right.
that's out there for a particular accounting system. It is QuickBooks can be used and is actually used by a lot of government contractors, and it is those satellite support systems and processes that are in place that holistically make it a DCAA compliant accounting system.
Okay, thank
And
you.
that's important, because a
Yes.
lot of small contractors are using QuickBooks.
Mhm.
What they have to understand is that it has to be set up correctly by somebody like Dion. And then the auxiliary system, the satellite systems that integrate, that help it become more compliant, have to work integrally with QuickBooks.
Yep.
Would you agree with that, Dion?
Yeah, I most definitely will agree with that, because it's kind of everyone has heard the saying garbage in, garbage out. So you want to make sure those feeder systems that are going into QuickBooks that are integrating are doing what they should be doing. So you can rely on what is actually in QuickBooks and just a holistic picture. So don't just look at QuickBooks specifically, but look at everything that goes into your entire accounting system, whether it's one big area that I wanted to mention is payroll. So you need to have a third-party payroll provider. So whether it's Paychex, ADP, Heartland. If you're using QuickBooks, you can't use Intuit, and that's one of the requirements to be a DCAA compliant system is you need some type of third-party external payroll provider. So there's nuances that are required for QuickBooks, but overall, it is something that can be done, including satellite systems and processes be put in place that can make it overall a compliant system.
Good. Hey, just a second, John. Michelle and Renata, you put questions in the chat. We'd like it if we could hold those questions until the Q&A afterwards. We definitely want you to ask them, but there's such detail that we need to talk about them specifically, okay? We appreciate that.
Oh, Don, before we move on, there's one thing I did want to mention, especially in the government contracting space, you will hear a lot about Deltek and CostPoint as well. And these are systems that, as you mature in government accounting, that most government contractors transition to because of the customization that can be done, and it hosts everything that you need when it comes to QuickBooks and satellite systems. It all hosted in one particular ERP. So that's why those are two really big systems in government accounting, because it does everything that a system would need to do all in one system per se. But that is something that happens as you become more mature. At a certain point, you will outgrow QuickBooks and need to transition into those type of systems.
And just to add to that, QuickBooks is important because it allows you to grow into CostPoint and Deltek, but also those additional systems are extremely expensive. And so if you don't know how to run your accounting in something as simplistic as QuickBooks, when you get into those more complicated systems, it's going to be terrible. Would you agree with that, Dion?
Oh, I would agree. There are so many nuances that need to be set up correctly. So it's great to start on QuickBooks. So when you make that transition to Deltek, you have the expertise and experience in that system to make that transition a lot more seamless.
So Dion, in your explanation, you said that government accounting is cost accounting. What is cost accounting?
Okay. Yeah, great question. So from my schooling, cost accounting, managerial accounting are kind of interchangeable. So it is a form of accounting that tracks costs by either project, service type, or some type of service line that can help inform make decisions. So from a government side, Cost accounting is how the government wants, excuse me. Cost accounting is how the government requires contractors to bill them. And we'll get further involved in that, but just a few things to highlight, like indirect costs, direct costs. They want these things segregated and bucketed to ensure that you are only charging them what they should be charged. And that's where that audit comes from, where they can dig into your numbers and figure out where these numbers are coming from when it comes to, let's say if it's a service-based contract and you're providing people and it's an hourly rate that you're charging the government, they want to know what goes into that hourly rate. That's where the cost accounting comes into, because they want to know exactly why are you charging this person this much money per hour to the government, and how those numbers are made up. And we'll get further into how those numbers are made up. But that is why cost accounting is such a big thing with the government, because they want to know exactly how you're charging them and what you're charging them for.
And so essentially it's matching revenue and expenses to each individual project.
Yep.
That everybody knows what goes in and what goes out. And then the company knows whether it's making money or not, right?
Yes.
Correct. Yes. That's the most important aspect. Make sure you're making money. And it goes a long way to determine how it allows you to basically determine how much you can actually afford to pay someone based off what the contract value is, or which the hour per cost is that you are charging for a particular position. So it does a lot internally as well. Okay,
fantastic. Thank you, Dion. John?
Excellent. Yes. Leading right into the next question. It's perfect. Dion, can you define direct costs and indirect costs, and why these cost pools are really relevant to government contract accounting?
Okay, yeah. So direct costs is any cost that is directly tied to a specific project or service. So think of it in terms of a service contract. The people that you're actually employing to be on that contract, their salaries are considered a direct cost. Where your indirect costs are things that relate to the operation of the business, but not necessarily to that particular contract. So think of things such as if you have office space, or the emails associated with those employees, and health insurance, things of that nature that are not directly related to that particular contract. They're kind of indirectly related, is where the term direct cost comes from. So these costs are combined when it comes to, excuse me, let me back up some. You are allowed to build indirect costs into your fully burdened rate, is what we call it in federal contracting, which is your direct costs and your indirect costs combined, and it allows you to, and the government allows you to bill up to a certain percentage of your direct costs, but they must be allocated appropriately, and the methodology must be established when determining how much those indirect costs are when they come to a particular person.
Okay, so Dion and John, let's stay here for a while.
Okay.
Direct cost is probably really easy to understand. You can't do the contract unless you incur those costs. Indirect cost is a lot different, and there's so many parts to it. So, they have fringe and overhead and administrative and general. I mean, they just taken indirect costs and beat it up. Can you talk about indirect costs, and what are fringe costs? What are overhead? What's G&A? Please.
Okay. Yeah. So one way to think about indirect costs is ask yourself a question. So just ask yourself this question: if I didn't have this particular contract, would I still incur these costs? If the answer is yes, then that is an indirect cost, and not specific to that contract. So if you think of it in terms of that, by asking you that question, it will help you determine what an indirect cost is. Good. So Don, back to your breakdown: fringe, overhead. Oh boy, where do I start there? So fringe costs are okay. So fringe costs are costs related to employing your workforce. So think of things like PTO, health insurance, benefits, things of that nature, or more your fringe benefits, which you generally hear. And then when it comes indirect costs are, I should back up. Indirect costs are bucketed into kind of three different categories. You have fringe, overhead, and G&A, which is general administrative. So we talked about fringe first, what that is, and the overall indirect cost bucket. So we're talking about overhead, which are costs that are basically for employing your workforce, but not necessarily related to a particular project.
Okay.
So one way to think of that is, especially in this area, if there's like a security clearance process that people must go through,
Mhm.
and you have to sponsor them for that, that's kind of a overhead cost,
Okay.
because it's not directly related to a contract, it's related to a person on a particular contract,
Mhm.
but it is an overhead cost because you are sponsoring that person for security clearance.
Okay.
So, and to the third bucket, which is G&A or general administrative, these are costs that are not necessarily indirect costs related to a particular project, but more related to the overall business. So things like insurance, rent, emails, things of that nature. It's kind of how you want to segregate it and think about the different categories of indirect costs,
Mhm.
and how the distinct categories that are in there and how you classify each category.
Oh man, fantastic. I understand it now. I haven't understood it for 20 years. So thank you, Dion. We've got a
Appreciate it.
question in the chat that might be relevant. Anthony Jefferson says each company would have different direct and indirect costs based on experience, education, and willingness to reduce costs if necessary, depending on the industry, correct? I think he's asking the direct and indirect costs, are they based upon the company and the company's experience and education and willingness?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anthony,
Okay.
that's
Yeah,
not
so
right. During the Q&A, you can clarify it.
Okay, so Donna, I'll answer that question based off how you just described it. So each company's direct costs and indirect costs will be different. And that's something that the company needs to establish. So if you think about your bigger companies, let's say if you think about your Lockheed Martins, your Northrop Grummins, those are larger companies. So their indirect costs are going to be a lot more than a smaller company. So your indirect costs are directly related to the size of your actual company. Your direct costs can also be the same thing, where it's going to be related to the people that you're actually hiring for that particular contract and what type of work is being procured and the type of procurement vehicle, because some contracts may depend on education requirements or may be lower. So they're not going to allow as much as a bill rate. So you will hire a certain type of person to fill that, and their direct costs will be lower. Or some will require more experience. In order for more experience, you have to pay more because people tend to be further along in their career and will command a larger salary. So it is a very good question, where those costs will fluctuate by company, but that's why it is important to have a holistic established process, where if you are ever audited, you can basically state why your costs is this way, is the most important fact I want to come across today.
Okay. Hey, John, before you get to the next question, just let me ask, Dion, before you mentioned a loaded rate, which is a combination of direct and indirect, can you just briefly talk about how those two things are combined?
Yes. So more as you get further along in government contract, you may hear a fully burdened rate, loaded rate, or wrap rate. Essentially what that is when it comes to government contracting is how you would actually, when it comes to proposal, how you will price out your proposal and how much it'll actually cost you. So your fully burdened rate is essentially your direct costs, which is going to be the salary, and then your indirect costs, which is everything when it comes to benefits, any fringe benefits, overhead, all the stuff the company has. You'll get that percentage of whatever that cost is allocated by person, and you will apply that number to what your direct cost is for a particular individual on a project, and is quote unquote what your fully burdened rate is what is actually costing you in order to employ that person per hour. And that is what you would then, once you have that number established, then you would then charge the government that plus a percentage in order to make sure that you receive a profit. So that's where that knowing your fully burdened rate comes from. And then making sure that you are charging at least that in order to basically break even, but making sure you charge more, because we're in the business of making money and everyone wants to make money. So you need to know what is fully costing you for a particular person, including the direct labor plus the indirect cost.
Thank you, Dion. That's great. Can I just say, Tiara, I see your question in chat. Could we ask that during the Q&A afterwards? If you don't mind. Thank you. John?
Great. No, and Deanna, the last point you made was very great. If you don't know your costs, how can you accurately price a bid to the government or any other potential customer? Because clearly we're in the business to make money, profit, and create wealth. That's why we're here. Really important.
That is correct.
Yeah. We want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about timekeeping in terms of what are contracting, costing, and labor timekeeping. What is the importance of accurately being able to determine these categories?
Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna answer the question kind of backwards. So
Sure.
let's go labor timekeeping.
Mhm.
So labor timekeeping is a function of having a DCAA compliant system. They want you to track the time per person for a particular project all the way down to the CLIN. A CLIN is a contract line item number. So depending on the type of contract that you have, they may require that you bill per CLIN. And the CLIN is usually tied to a deliverable. Let's say if it is in terms of, let's say building an airplane, one CLIN might be building like the frame of the plane. So they want costs broken down to building that, and then the associated different parts. And we have a hot mic there.
Yeah, would somebody please mute? Thank you. Go ahead, Dion, sorry.
Okay, yeah, so that's where the labor keeping part comes in, where one person can have multiple different projects that they're working on, but what is billed to that particular to one of those particular projects should only be the amount of time that they actually worked on that particular project. So a lot of times you may hear a WBS, which is a work breakdown structure, which is basically the lowest level or CLIN level, kind of interchangeable, where you want to get down as granular as possible to ensure that you're accurately tracking the costs associated with a particular contract line item number and the contract in general. And that kind of rolls up into contract costing, which is essentially not only making sure that the costs are tracked accurately from a timekeeping purpose, but all your other costs for a particular contract, whether it's travel, if there's any ODAs, which is other direct expenses. I'm sorry, yeah, ODOs. I'm sorry, any other direct expenses. That is the overall contract costing of what the entire project has cost, not just strictly what the labor is on that contract.
And so, John, if I could jump in for a second.
Go ahead.
You mentioned contract line item numbers. So
yes.
not only do you have to track the contract, but you may have to contract various line item numbers inside of that contract in your accounting.
Yes.
Can you talk about, please, whoever that, could you mute, please? Thank you. Could you talk about that aspect of it? So how many that could be inside of a contract?
Okay, yeah. So from personal experience, when it comes to winning work and setting everything up in an accounting system, we would the most recent contract that helped set up, it was 5 different people. We had set up for the base year, then each individual option year. That we had to set up per person based on their role and effort. And then in addition, so you have a contract number that's set up, then base year, option year 1, 2, all the way down to 4. And then what in there, it was segregated further into what particular role they were, whether it was a project manager, a senior, or things of that nature. And then inside that, we had to have it broken down by each individual deliverable that was in the statement of work. Right. So when you really drill down to it, you can pretty much start up here and get all the way down here by the end of it, where not only are you selecting you have to select the appropriate project when it comes to timekeeping, you have to select the appropriate year, then you have to select the appropriate level, and then in there you have to select the appropriate deliverable, and then depending on that, there may be certain tasks that roll up to that deliverable that you may have to select the appropriate task that you're working on.
Wow. And so John, folks who don't know, used to be in Osneyville, and he's the guy who actually gets the contracts. So John, when Dion is putting all this accounting together, is it something that rolls up that you absolutely need to see at your level?
Sure, yeah, thank you, Don. That's a great question. We don't need to see the detail, but part of when you're selling to the government and you're getting in front of folks like the OSBU director, which can have can have say in whether you get that award or not, or put you on a short list, or kind of introduce you to folks. Part of your conversation needs not only be what you can do for the government and the challenges that we can solve. You need to give the government confidence that you have systems and processes in place that you can handle large, complex awards. And this is why a lot of contract officers, which can be the most conservative people we've ever met from a risk standpoint, will want to almost default to a larger business because they feel more confident that they have these systems and processes in place to be able to handle such things. So I would always advise companies that, and we'll talk about this in the next session, I believe, talking about capital, that if you have lines of credit and capital available as part of your capability statement, you need to talk about that. I would go in and talk about at some point as you're growing, it's worth getting the various ISO standards, because again, that dictates that you have an independent third party validate that you have processes in place to support large contracts. And also it tells the government that you realize it's important enough that you're going to spend money to invest to get these certifications. So it's really important that if you've had Six Sigma, Black Belt training as it relates to cost reduction, process efficiencies, those are things to have. And if you don't have one, maybe consider going out and getting someone, you or yourself, on your senior person on your team, getting trained with these certifications, not only to use out for the client, but to use within your own company. So if you have these capabilities, and if you have like a certified DCAA accounting system in place, yes, mention that in your capabilities. Because again, and with the ISO standard, because it speaks to the fact that you've invested, you've reinvested money back into your business to let the customer know and other joint venture parties know that you value systems and processes. And if you want that next big, large contract, not only do you have the technical capability, can you actually execute the work? And so inside Department of Energy, that was a lot of conversations of behind the wall, so to speak. Hey, John, yeah, maybe small business can do the work, but I don't know. I feel comfortable with this larger company because they've got the big name, or I know they've got the processes. So, but if you come in with your capability statement and you can show and demonstrate, and obviously have invested in these processes and these independent certifications, that goes a long way from a credibility standpoint that you're ready for that big contract that's coming up. That you can be the prime on that contract and you can direct the contract. The contract officer can trust that you can report, that you can handle the sophistication and all the reporting that comes into place.
Wow, John, thank you. Folks, that's from the top, okay? So
Well, thank you for that question. That I would use that argument all the time. Well, because I would say 1 in 10, maybe 2 in 10 small businesses actually have these we talk about the ISO standards and such in place. And so when you have that in place and you have a pre-existing line of credit from a bank or someone else in place, those are independent third-party validations that you are a strong business. So please get them and use those and use as part of your marketing.
Yeah. Hey, Dion, we've talked about direct costs. We've talked about indirect costs, but there are a couple more. There's allowable and unallowable costs. I mean, we didn't invent this stuff, folks.
Yeah.
Dion, can you tell us allowable and unallowable, please?
Yeah.
So when I started my business, no one told me I need to, know all this stuff. I thought I could just contract.
That's why we're having this session.
Yeah. So hopefully everyone is seeing how nuanced government contracting is and accounting for government contracting is. So allowable costs are costs that simply are allowable to the government, that the government will allow you to bill them. And that is the way that you need to think about it, or costs associated that the government will allow you to invoice them for. So that goes back to obviously direct labor, your overhead costs, things of that nature, that the government knows that businesses incur on behalf of employee and will reimburse for that. Your unallowable costs are costs that the government is not going to reimburse the company for. So think of things, if you have happy hours for your well, whichever one of these right now, yeah. If you have happy hours things of that nature where it's specific to your particular company and not associated with the government is not going to then allow you to turn around and bill them for that, because it has nothing to do with the government, and they're not going to allow that. And that's where the unallowable costs come from.
Okay, so if I have a happy hour, I can't put that in indirect costs?
Ooh.
Hey, do that as your own.
Don't
do
answer
that as
that.
your own question.
Hey, stop the
So
record. Okay. Go to the next
So-
question, John.
Yeah, on to the next question. Yeah.
Next question. Okay. What do the acronyms CP, FFP, CPFF, and T and M stand for, and what are the relevance to these categories? What relevance, excuse me, do these categories have for government contracting? Again, the acronyms were CP,
Okay.
FFP,
Mhm.
CPFF, and T and M.
Okay. Wow, that is definitely a tongue full there. So before I start, I want to say what I'm about to say, think of it in terms of construction, and think of it in terms of construction like a very large skyscraper. It'll help you understand what these costs essentially are. So CP stands for cost plus. FFP is firm fixed price. In addition, CPFF is cost plus fixed fee, and then T&M is time and materials. So I told you to think in terms of building a skyscraper. It'll help you understand these concepts a little bit more, but also in terms of building a skyscraper, think about it in terms of risk as well, and who has the risk when it comes to particular contracts. And I'll explain that a little bit more. So let's start with firm fixed price. So think of it when it comes to, let's say if you were building a 50-story skyscraper and you have a firm fixed price contract, and the firm fixed price is for, say $5 billion, that you as the government are not going to pay more than $5 billion for this particular contract. That is a firm fixed price where both parties agree to a particular contract price that it cannot exceed that cap. So you as the seller, which is the government contractor, and the government is the buyer, you as seller, if you incur more cost than that $5 billion, essentially you lost money on that particular contract, and you have to eat the overages. Whereas if you are able to do the contract for $4 billion, essentially you reap those benefits of that extra $1 billion in profit, because you were able to do the contract for less than you agreed to. So the risk with a firm fixed price is pretty much on the government contractor, because the government's saying, I'm not paying more than this. So the risk of the overages is on the person who's providing the services. So on to the next one. Time and material is kind of a hybrid between firm fixed price and cost plus. Time and material essentially means that the government is going to reimburse you for whatever time it took and material it took to complete the project. So that same building, if it costs you, let's say, $2.5 billion, the government's going to reimburse you $2.5 billion, because that's how much time and effort went into completing it, and the material cost. They're not going to reimburse you $1 more than that, and you're not going to be able to get $1 more. So the risk level there for both parties is about even, where you're equally sharing the risk, because the government is going to pay you what it actually costs, but you cannot at the same time make a profit on more than it actually costs you for it. Well, you can't make a profit, and when it should be built in, that goes back to your fully burdened rate, but they're not going to, whatever that fully burdened rate is and the materials, you can't get more than that. So the third bucket is cost plus. So essentially what that means is whatever your cost is as a contractor, plus some type of award fee or fixed fee, which is sometimes the award fee can be 10% of total contract value, or a set dollar amount, or a percentage of the work, or it is usually tied to something in the contract. And essentially what's happening there is the risk is on the government on that point, because one, as a government contractor, you are going to reimburse me for whatever my cost is to complete the work, plus an additional fee that you're on the hook for paying me. And that is the difference between those particular contracts. time and material, cost plus, and firm fixed price.
Okay. Thank you.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. It's good to know that you can make a profit. You should be making a profit in each
Yes,
one of
should
them.
be.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that comes in how you do your other direct and indirect costs and your pools. So
That is
where it comes
correct.
in. Good.
Yes, Don, that's a good point. Regardless of the type of contract, you should be making a profit on it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Did everybody hear that?
Yes.
Yes.
John?
Yes. Couple of the questions here for you, Deanne. First one is, can you explain the technical difference between bookkeepers and accountants, and when is it appropriate for the business owner to use one service versus the other?
Okay. Yeah. So that is a really good question. Sometimes people can get it confused. So let's back up with what a bookkeeper does. A bookkeeper is essentially categorizing transactions, posting journal entries if needed for a business. Whereas there is a distinction between what an accountant does, because accountants are by trade bookkeepers as well, but it's that extra knowledge and going to school where you're able to essentially take that transactional data, which a bookkeeper is more transactional focused, where an accountant is taking that data and interpreting it and giving you an analysis on what that data actually means for your business and giving that insight. So that's where that distinction is, because an accountant can do your bookkeeping and give you that extra insight, whereas a bookkeeper is just going to do your transactional data. Then you need to go to an accountant in order to understand what that data means. So especially when it comes to liquidity ratios and debt to equity ratios and things like that, understanding what those ratios are, how you get those numbers, and what those mean to your business, and how creditors and such will look at those. Right. And that is where that distinction of having an accountant comes into play.
Right. And let me say that it's really important to know those numbers, because, for instance, when you go to the bank, they're looking at the debt service ratio that we need to know about. So it's extremely important for you to use the correct accountant to set up your finances, and then use an accountant who knows government contracting to make sure all the things that we've been talking about for the last half an hour are in place. Absolutely. Hey, Dion, sometimes depending upon your certification, the government will want a compiled financial statement or a reviewed financial statement or an audited financial statement. Can you tell us the difference between those three just briefly, and if there are any cost differences in terms of me being able to pay you to do those, what that may be? I don't need an exact cost, but what's at least.
Okay, I don't want to give my secrets out there.
No, okay. I don't want you to either, man.
Okay. Yeah, so there is a distinction between each of those three, and they all sound similar, but there is a very big distinction. So let's start first with a compilation. That is essentially if I were to be hired as, let's say, your accountant, there is no independence requirement for me to do a compilation. I am simply compiling financial statements or some type of report. That's what a compilation is. It's simply taking your data as the business and putting it in a format that is easily to read, whereas a financial statement or report, and then you can use that for a third-party purpose. That is a compilation, and generally the prices for that are the lowest out of the three, because there is no independence requirement. There's no verifying information from a third party. Like myself, I'm simply taking the numbers you give me and put them in a specific format for you. So the middle tier there is reviewed financial statements. Essentially what that is more using analytical procedures, and you can use some substantive procedures where I'm taking the financial statements that you've already prepared and seeing if those numbers are reasonable and free of material misstatements. So it's a little bit more involved than a compilation, and that's why the price will be more than a compilation. Now that third one, an audit, that is essentially what we've been talking about this entire time with DCAA, is where you need to hire a third party who is not affiliated with your business whatsoever. The same thing with a review. They cannot be affiliated in any way, shape, or form with your business in order to provide those services to you. So an audit is taking that same data that you would in review, but now I'm performing tests to see if I can recompute the numbers that you got and seeing how your internal control process is set up and your procedures to see if you have the steps in place to ensure that the numbers that are being reported on your financial statements are free again from material misstatements. And that is the most in-depth and invasive of the three. And it costs more because of the requirements that are placed upon that auditor and everything that it entails. And generally they can be take a longer duration than a review or compilation.
Mhm. Thank you. So how does an organization know whether they're obligated to do a compilation review or an audit on their company for the federal government, Dion?
Yeah, so that kind of goes back to what you're saying, that particular, maybe the contract may requirement, or when you hit a certain threshold when it comes to 8A or SDVOB, VOSB, depending on what your revenue threshold is, will trigger these. So think of it in terms of the more money you make, the more threshold is going to be required when it comes to, you're going to graduate basically from a compilation to review. Then when you make more money, now you're going to have a third party independent audit that's writing a report on your financial statement. So think of it in terms of this way: the more success you have, the more the government is going to dig into your financials.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you.
We got time for one more?
Yeah, we had last question, then we're going to jump to the Q&A. Dion, sorry to hurt your feelings here, but not all accountants and not all CPA firms are created the same. As a business owner, how can I determine, or how should I evaluate which accountant or which CPA firm to hire? What should I look for?
So great question. So the best way I would say that you can evaluate which ones to hire, or you should be able, it's kind of like interview process. Think of it no different. You get a chance to interview someone because you want someone who's going to be in your corner and tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. You don't want someone who is going to blur the lines when it comes to anything, any legalities or laws when it comes to taxes or government accounting. You want someone who knows what they're doing and is going to tell you such. If you need to change, then you change for a reason, and you want someone that you can depend on, who is going to be responsive to you. One, has a time to dedicate to your particular business needs, and has an open line of communication as well. There's a lot of times where I've talked to people where they can't get in touch with their particular firm or CPA. You want to be able to have that two-way communication where they respond in a reasonable time and they're attentive to what you need, but also at the same time, they're going to tell you what you need to hear. And it's a comfort level too, because not all personalities, I will say, mix. So you want to be able to talk to your accounting firm or your CPA just how we're talking now, and have that open dialogue where if you have a question about something, they can tell you the right way to go about it.
And so I always say the company needs to own their financials. The business owner needs to own their financials. And your accountant should be one of your closest friends. You should be able to talk about anything, and your accountant should be talking to you in English instead of some other nomenclature. And so you get what you pay for. And so you need to get the best accountant, Dion. That's
Appreciate
not a problem. Up front to help you get started, so that when you get to all of these cleanse and audits and everything else, you don't have a problem. And as John will tell you in the next session that we're going to talk about capital, in order to get capital, you need good financials. And so we can't emphasize enough, John and I, that you need a good accounting firm. You need an astute accountant who knows government accounting, and you need a personable accountant who's going to take the time with you to make sure that you know your financials, you know when you're making a profit, and that you own your financials. I can't tell you how many times people have gone to the bank and the bank has asked them a question, what is this? And they say, well, I got to call my accountant. That's not the way it's supposed to go. Any parting comments from the three master's degrees?
I want to say that last part again, Don. Own your financials as a business owner. Whether it is your financial statements when it comes to taxes as an individual, that is your information that you should own. The accountant is just interpreting things for you, making it easier to understand on what needs to happen, but that is not their responsibility to ensure that you are doing everything that you need to do as a business owner. We will make suggestions, but you ultimately, everything falls on you as the business owner.
Okay,
And,
great. Fantastic.
John, we've got a couple of questions in chat. Most of them, I think, Zuri, if you would ask that during the open Q&A to come up in a couple of minutes, that would be the time. One part of her question is, when's the best time to hire an accountant to avoid the tax season? Forget tax season. Hire an accountant when you first get started. While you're doing your business plan, you should have an accountant handle it, because there's a financial portion of your business plan. You should be looking for an accountant as your first buddy. Your accountant, your attorney should be part of your initial team. Okay. And
yeah, then, I was going to add to that, Zuri, that's a great question. And what the bank is going to look for, and we're going to get to capital next week, but is really understanding as a business owner, keeping your personal finances separate from your business finances.
Hey, John, can you say that again? Can you say it for people in the back, please?
People in the back. Keep your personal finances separate from your business finances. Small businesses, it's kind of, we can all fall in that trap pretty quickly, but that is critical. And that's why getting the accountant up front, setting up the accounts. If you start in QuickBooks, great. They can set chart of accounts, general ledger, but they can start that from the beginning, you thinking that through. And I think particularly in this environment where we've gone to, with the pandemic, now more hybrid, particularly, it's great to have a home office as well, but those are things that you're going to set up properly from an accounting standpoint to keep yourself out of trouble, and also so you can track correctly personal expenses and your business expenses. And I think, Don, we're in the Q&A session now, right?
Well, not yet. Dion, would you put your contact information in chat for everyone so they know how to contact you by phone and etc. And before we go to Q&A, I just want to say, everybody on the Maryland Black Chamber of Commerce is your Chamber of Commerce. It's for all of us. And we are 400 members strong now. We're looking to increase that membership. So if you are not a member, please go to marylandmbcc.org and hit the join now button. Your peers and your associates who are not members, please tell them how much information you are gaining from these sessions. Have them join us next time, but also have them go to mbcc.org and join. The reason we're asking you that is the more clout that we have, the better we can service the small business community. And the better we can service the small business community, the more success each one of us is going to have individually and collectively. Okay. John, you want to talk about the Q&A, how it's going to be handled?
Yeah, what we're going to do is two things we're going to do. Don and I are going to go up to some questions I typed in. We're going to wait during Q&A. So I'm just going to call out your name. If you could just introduce yourself briefly and ask your question, that would be great. If other questions come up, you didn't put it in the chat. If you go to the bottom of the Zoom under reactions, there's a place that you can raise your hand there as well. And we'll work to recognize you there as well. So that's kind of what we'll do.
Okay.
That works. All right, just a second, going back up. Let's see, Mr. Anthony Jefferson, you had a question or two? If you're still on, you can ask.
Unmute Anthony. No? Okay. Michelle Overton, you had a question?
Trial.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Hi, everybody. It's really been a good session. Yeah,
Thank you.
It's been great information.
Tell us who you are and the name of your company.
Oh, Michelle Overton. The name of my company is Women of Good Works, and we're a small nonprofit, and we provide temporary assistance to individuals and families in need.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you for doing that service.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome. I mean,
that's critical. No, it's important.
I'm sorry.
I said, no, that's very important, the work you're doing. Thank you. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. My question was regarding when I heard that there were audits being done, because we haven't done like a major contract or anything like that, but I didn't realize that you would need such a specialized accountant for that, or CPA. And I was just wondering, does this happen like a lot? Because it sort of sounds like this is happening more often than people would think. And I just wanted to know if people failing audits was a major thing.
Dion, I think she's talking about DCAA audits.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, so it is something that happens a lot. There are no official statistics that DCA puts out on how many particular companies they do audit. Kind of think of it like the IRS. They are doing it. You may never be audited your entire government contracting career with your company, but you still need to be following the appropriate protocols, because at any moment's notice, they have the ability to go and audit any contract that you're currently on or past contracts that you build on. And that's one thing that we forgot to bring up is DCA has the ability to go back, especially with defense contracts. If a contract is closed, they had the ability to go back and still ask you about that particular contract. It can be 5 years from now. They can come back and ask you, how did you get these costs for this particular contract, and give me all your information. So that's one thing that I forgot to mention, that it doesn't have to be current contracts, it can be closed contracts as well.
Mm-hmm. And so in addition to that, Defense Contract Administration normally audits defense companies, but the application of the criteria that they use is pertinent to the entire government, because it's important that you do it right. And so the chances of you getting audited if you're working for the Department of Commerce is probably much less than if you're working for the Navy. But again, doing it right, you don't have to worry about it. Would you agree with that, Dion and John?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yes, I do, because the standards are government-wide, not Department of Defense specific.
Mm-hmm. Renata, you had a question in the chat. Would you unmute and ask it now? Renata, still around? Okay. Anthony? No. Tiara, are you still available?
I am.
Hi. Tell us your
Hello.
name, your company, and what you do.
Hello.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. My name is Tiara Filio. The last name looks a lot harder to pronounce than it is. I am the CEO of Flavor. We are a cultural market research and strategy consultancy, and we help enterprise companies from brand awareness all the way through loyalty and retail retention. My question is for DCAA. Do they, and I think you just answered this in your last answer, but do they audit the entire company? So I know they're looking at costs, et cetera. Are they auditing the entire company, or are they auditing specific contracts? And if it is specific contracts, is it only government contracts?
Yeah, great question. So normally they will audit a specific contract, but part of your overhead costs and things of that nature are company wide. So in essence, they are auditing your entire company when it comes to that overhead rate, but they'll be auditing what is on a particular contract is mainly what DCA will be doing. But it's kind of, I would say, kind of hybrid in between a particular contract for sure, but also your company, because they want to make sure that you have policies and procedures not in place, not specifically for that contract, but overall your company wide, that you're following a set some set rules for all your contracts to begin with.
Absolutely. And I think I'm thinking more so of the direct and indirect costs, right? I think based on, we know every contract can be different, right?
Yes.
And so when we're looking at comparing, if I have a large automotive contract versus a government contract, some of those costs are going to be quite different based on how we service. And so are there guidelines in terms of what is acceptable from a profit range or from a pricing range, or is it, and I was on the last call as well, when I think, John, you mentioned that we can go on sam.gov and find what our competitors are actually pricing as well. And I did that exercise, which was awesome. But is there sort of a baseline of what you should be using, or is it kind of just like, all right, as long as you have just a foundational process and that's what you're sticking to across the board?
So, okay, thank you for the clarification there. Yeah, so each contract would be different, and that's more of making sure that when it comes to your direct costs and overhead costs generally should be the same regardless of the contract. Direct costs would change depending on the particular contract, but make sure you have a set philosophy in place that you're applying to all contracts so they can understand how you got these particular costs for a whatever contract they are actually auditing. And then the second half of your question was, is there like a standard or when it comes to what you should be charging? I want to say that there are guidelines on how there is actually a Excel spreadsheet that DCA puts out that can help you determine your direct costs, and generally, I'm sorry, your direct and overhead costs, and generally what you should be charging. Generally, I would say it's about generally between 1.5 and 2. And what I mean by that is 1 will be essentially break even, and you essentially charge about 1.5 of that, or 2 is generally what companies, depending on how large they are, charge somewhere in that range in order to make a profit.
So let me add to that, because we're CFOs for large government contractors, so we see these DCA audits a lot. The vast majority of the audits are not the entire company. They're mostly on those direct rates, indirect rates, fringe rates. Those rates are being passed along, direct rates for the contract and indirect rates for the contract. Seldom is the entire company audited unless there's a big problem. And then when that's a problem, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Setting the rates depends upon the size of your company, the size of the contract, the requirements of the contract, and the costs that you're going to have to incur to both service that contract and maintain your company. So it varies based upon specifically the contract that you're bidding on, whether it's cost plus time and materials, and how much it costs to actually keep your company going, and how much it's going to cost your company to actually fulfill that contract. So Tiara, it basically varies. Building your contract is what your fee structure is what Dion helps you to do, so that when DCA comes in, they're not looking at what everybody else did. They're looking at how did you come up with these costs that you're asking the government to pay for, and they're just looking at you. And our responsibility is to make sure there's a profit in it. Their responsibility is to make sure that it is fine as possibly can be. And those are two totally opposed
Right,
actions.
right.
And that's why you need an accountant who knows exactly what to do.
Okay,
Yeah, Don,
that's
that is a good, Don, I mean, that is a good point. As business, you want to make money. As government, they don't want you to make any money. So there's a fine line there.
Yeah, okay.
excellent.
Kevin, does that answer? You good?
That answered everything completely. Thank you so much.
Okay, my pleasure. Hey, Zuri asked a question, and Zuri, I can answer this. She asked basically how much does a compilation cost, how much review costs, how much an audit costs, and each one of those is different. It depends upon the size of the company, the amount of material they have to go through. As Dion said, the compilation is the least expensive of the three. The other two are, Dion, you can explain this better than I can, assurance services. The reviews next, because they just look at samples, and in the audit, they look at everything. So Dion, you want to just comment on that? But we can't tell you how much it costs.
Yeah, I definitely can't tell you how much it costs, because like Don said, it is solely dependent on your particular business, and the size of your business will determine the level of effort that third party will provide to you. In terms of a review and an audit, that third party, because it has to be a CPA that officially signs the report, so it has to be a CPA firm that's providing those services to you. They are providing a level of assurance with Don stated earlier. Simply they're putting their think of it as their reputation and their reputation on the line, and their license, that what is being stated in their report is accurate as possible. So there's real world examples of Enron back in the day, Arthur Andersen, not to too much detail, where they weren't doing what they should have did, and it resulted in the collapse of the fifth largest at the time accounting firm in the world, because they were signing things knowing they were not true. So an audit is basically with complete confidence that everything is in here is 100% accurate, essentially, and you do that by sampling. So that is why it is the most in-depth and costs the most, because not only are they verifying what you as the company or management did, but they're putting a reputation online by signing that report stating that what you provided, they've reviewed and done their due diligence, and they are satisfied that what you provided is free and accurate of errors.
Yeah.
And then, go ahead, Don.
Dion, that's where we went from the big 8 accounting firms to the big 4, right?
Yes, that is true. Yeah, Enron, WorldCom, yeah.
Yeah, quickly.
Renetta has a
And
question.
also, but seriously, oh, I'm
Go,
sorry,
John.
one last question, add on that, but seriously, that's why when you look at the case,
Did we freeze?
Yeah, I think he froze.
Okay. He's gonna drink
for our
some Coke.
smaller businesses, but this is very real that is happening real time in front of us out in the business world.
Yeah. Hey, Renata had a question. Dion, what are the auxiliary systems that you can add to QuickBooks to become DCA compliant? You already talked about you need to have an outsourced payroll. Are there systems that you can add for computing direct rates and indirect rates and things like that complement QuickBooks, you think?
So there are other features. I don't off the top of my head, I can't name particular
Right,
ones
okay.
for now, but there are other systems that you can use that'll help feed into that. QuickBooks, I would say QuickBooks core essentially is not compliant. There's things that you can add on, like payroll need to be added on, timekeeping is a feature that needs to be added on, things of that nature will need to be added on. So there are, looking at it, it depends on what your particular budget is when it comes to these tools, but there are tools out there that can be used in different systems that can help feed into everything. So yes, I can't name them right now, but there are systems out there that can be used to make you overall compliant with DCAA.
Okay. Tia Young, you have a question? You want to mute and ask it?
Yes, thank you so much.
Can you tell us your company?
My company is Sage Solutions, and we produce cable television shows and send them around the nation, to help small businesses and people in the community.
And Tia is the producer of my show. Thank you, Tia.
Well, you're easy to produce. You're easy to work with.
Are you sure about that? But anyway, that's not a
Okay, don't start any trouble, John.
conversation.
Well, my question is, do you recommend that small businesses have a CPA and a lawyer before they attempt to try and fill out an 8A application? And also, are the 8 applications easier than they were, some years back? I know way back in the day, they were horrible to try to fill out. And I've had people coming to me asking me if I can help them with it, and I'm telling them I'm not qualified, that they need to go to a CPA or a lawyer. But I was saying that off the top of my head. So what do you say?
Dion, you want to get this or?
I was going to say, yeah,
You
go
can
ahead.
have
Sorry.
an accountant or a lawyer from the time that you start your business. When you decide to go into government contracting, then you need to find an accountant and attorney who know government contracting specifically.
Yeah,
The 8A application, all government certification applications are, let's say,
Rigorous.
not user friendly. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
yeah, no, I was gonna add that when you even apply for SAM.gov, they're part of the FAR sections, FAR 52 dot whatever that they're asking you about. So unless you are well-trained in that beforehand, I think you want to get a government contracting lawyer just so you understand what's being asked of you, even when you're going to register in SAM.gov to be eligible to be a government contractor. You are going to have to read and understand and click off various aspects as it relates to the FAR. So I think that you should have those in place beforehand. I will say that the SBA has put a lot of effort and time and money to try to make applying for the programs a little bit simpler. I believe that they're all online now, that they're automated. So I think it's a little bit better than it was years ago. I know some efforts have been made to make it so, but like Don said, it is the government. They're going to ask for a lot of documentation and paperwork. And so to the extent they're asking for tax returns and et cetera, you want to make sure that your accountant and your lawyer, they can, there's a checklist you can download now to say, here's everything you're going to need to apply for the 8A program. I would take that, make sure you understand documents and share that request with your lawyer you should have in place that's familiar with government contracting, because they're going to start asking for business and tax returns and that type of information.
Thank you.
Ebony Gray, that's something that you help people do, isn't it? Would you unmute and talk to us?
Yes, no,
Hi,
so
Ebony. What do you do?
first of all, hi everyone. I am Ebony Gray.
Name your
I
company.
am the CEO for Gray's Consulting Group, and I am also the membership chair for the MBCC. So please join us. And this was a great session. And yes, there are free resources. Of course, you know what free means. Sometimes you gotta wait. So sometimes you want to pay to get that personalized one-on-one attention. So please use the recommended CPAs and attorneys. But we also have the PTAC, AKA the Apex. They just changed their name, Procurement Technical Assistance Center, that will walk you through the whole process. You do not have to be frustrated. They will help you get women-owned certified or VA certified or 8A certified. The SBA will help you for free. The SBDC will help you for free or with a nominal fee. And also SCORE will help you. I'm a SCORE mentor as well. They will help you walk through the government contract process so that you can do it right the first time.
And Ebony put her a link in the chat, so get that from that. But I need to say, before you go to any of these sources, you need to educate yourself about the government contracting, the jargon, the lingo. Don't walk in there expecting to be educated. You've got to be educated when you walk in so you understand what's going on. Because everything in government contracting is acronym. FAR, DCAA,
Everything.
NAICS
Right.
codes. I mean, if you don't know what they're talking about, you're going to be lost.
And one thing I'll add is we've helped folks get HubZone and other certifications, but the biggest thing you can do is really get the compliance section now that it's online and get your documentation together before you start. And that's when you want to make sure yourself, you own your financials, your lawyer, your accountant, that you understand the documentation you need to have in place. Going down to your articles of organization, your bylaws, you've registered the state, all these things you just need to, so make sure what you can do in terms of educating yourself about the program is really getting that compliance section and the documentation together in place before you start.
And John, I wanted to highlight something that you, Don, and myself both said, or all said, I should say. You heard the word financials a lot in there.
Yeah.
Make sure that you have financial statements and your tax returns are prepared when you're going for any of these certifications.
Yep.
Because those, especially when it comes to any disadvantage, aka advantage certification, whether it's MB through the state of Maryland, 8A, services able, women owned, minority owned, they all want to make sure that you have, that you are what you say you are, but you have appropriate financials in place to and that you meet the criteria. So make sure all that stuff is in perfect shape and file before you even start the process, because that is one of the requirements for all of them.
And make sure that you talk to Dion or your accountant about your key performance index ratios. You need to know what your cost of goods sold are, your percentages. You need to know what your net profit percentage is. And when you go into the bank, you need to know what your debt service ratio is. I mean, you're not getting a dime if it doesn't meet, right now, John, is it 2.5 or something like that? Well, anyway, you need to know these things. And Dion can help you make sure that you understand your financials. That's extremely important. Dion, I don't see it. Are there any other questions that anyone else wants to ask outside of the chat? Please unmute and let's ask.
Yeah, Don, you're breaking up there a little bit. I think Don was just asking, we don't see any other additional questions in the chat. There's a lot of great information in the chat. So if you don't have it, please, you can access those links. But do we have any further questions? I don't see any raised hands here.
Okay. Let's sign off, buddy.
All right. Well, hey, we want to thank everyone for joining us. And also we want to thank Dion, and you will get a brief survey after this meeting. Our goal here is to do two things. One is to bring practical information that you can apply at 3:30, as soon as you sign off on your business today, and bring experts in like Dion and others that do this for a living every day. And so we want to bring you real information, and then hopefully that, and we want to make sure that we believe that this should be information you perhaps could not get from some of the other free sources that may be out there from the government, because they have to speak generally to everybody. But we want to make sure that you can get practical information that you can use to actually grow and scale your business today. So please take a few minutes to fill out the survey. Any suggestions for us to get better? We're always looking to get better. So let us know.
And definitely go to the MBCC website, marylandbcc.org, and join. And there's one thing that I like to tell everyone: success in business is where preparedness and opportunity meet. The preparedness is on us. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Dion, thank you, buddy. Any parting comments aside the fact to tell them how brilliant you are?
What we forgot to mention is my Lean Six Sigma yellow belt, so that's okay.
Oh, tell them that you've been on TV 5 times, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
You know, I
please.
put some little dibble dabble.
Okay,
If you guys,
Channel 4, come on, tell us about it.
ABC, the local ABC channel here in
Okay.
DC. I'll be
right.
on CBS next month too. So
All right.
Put your
everything's
autograph in the
posted.
chat so I can sell it later.
Yes, right.
We'll get there. We'll get there. I guess one thing, if you can take one thing that you should take away from this entire discussion today is you want to get someone who knows government accounting and that is in your corner. And it's something, as Don said, you get what you pay for. You know, we've all tried to, at some point, you know, buy the cheapest thing, and then we end up spending more money when we have to go replace it with something that has more quality. So think of it in terms of not a cost, but an investment in your business. And when you think of it that way, yeah, investment in success, yes. When you think of it that way, it is a lot more doable and necessary in order for you to have the success that you want when it comes to government contracting.
Thank you. Hey,
Amen.
Dion, really appreciate it. Looking forward to working with you. Everybody, Dion's information is in the chat. Please give him a buzz and talk to him. John, you want to sign off? John is the most intelligent guy that Dion and I know. So we're going to let him be the last one that you hear today, okay?
Hey, we want to say thank you for everyone for being here. Remember that you own your success, but the benefit of the Maryland Black Chamber is we're on this journey together to support one another and to help one another reach our highest and best potential. So I look forward to seeing you. And remember, we have future webinars coming up, and we love to see everyone in person on, and hopefully a nice sunny day, June 20th. So have a great day, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.
Our next session is May 9th, so we'll see everyone there.
Yep. All right.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for
Thank you.
attending.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dion. See you, John.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.